everybody. Welcome to this live training with Candace, of course, all about gut health and PCOS in honor of PCOS Awareness Month, which is the month of September. Today is also Dietitian's Day as well. So, all the celebrations today, which is very exciting. Now, historically, we've been having issues getting early because it's a bit sluggish each week, and I nearly give up each week, but we get there in the end. So let's see if we can. Oh my God, we got it! We got it!
Let's go!
Oh my God!
Good,
Miracle!
Very exciting. How are we today?
Good. How are you, Candace?
Very good, thank you.
That's great. Yes, I was just saying to everyone, today is all the celebrations. We've got Dietitian's Day today. It's September's PC Awareness Month. And then earlier in the month, we had Women's Health Week. September is just all go, 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 isn't it? So today we're going to be talking about gut health and PCOS, which is a topic that we will be discussing as well on the podcast this week. So if you're not subscribed to our podcast, Fertility Friendly Food, then please do. And that episode will go into more detail. We'll just give you like a little teaser today. But what is really interesting is a few kind of emerging scientific papers about the links between the gut microbiome, which is the community of those bacteria and other types of microbes that live in our large intestine or bowel, and its relationship to PCOS. So can you tell us a little bit more about those links and what some of this research is pointing to? It's obviously in its early days, so it's not very solid, but some indication as to where it's at.
Yeah, certainly. And I guess it is really interesting because we don't have cause and effect. So I think that's really important to say that, all of this stuff is, it's a work in progress, I think is a good place to start. And we certainly know that there are definitely links between what that gut microbiome is doing and many, many areas of our health. And now we are getting some of the evidence to see that with PCOS in particular, there's definitely a link there. So what has been found is that women who have PCOS have an altered gut microbiome compared to women who do not have PCOS. And I guess what we don't know is PCOS causing an altered gut microbiome, or is the altered gut microbiome contributing to the development of PCOS? And that's probably where we're sitting at the moment, is just that chicken and egg scenario. Which is coming first, we don't know. But we know that there's certainly that alteration there. And so for us, from like a diet and lifestyle perspective, we can certainly look at, well, what can we do to improve the gut microbiome of women with PCOS? And then let's see what impact that starts to have on symptoms. And so we don't really know exactly what is going to work and what isn't going to work, but we have some great underlying nutrition principles that we know are going to help benefit your overall health, benefit your gut microbiome, and therefore we do see some improvements in PCOS symptoms with that as well.
Yeah. It takes me, I was reading some of the papers again yesterday as preparing a presentation on PCOS next week, and took me right back to when I first started university. And this is a bit of an anecdote, so stay with me. But when I first started university, I got accepted into this like additional research program alongside my studies. And so my research group was about the gut microbiome, and it was actually about weight and diabetes at that time. And it was more than 10 years ago now. So the research landscape in this area was quite different. And the way that you could prove that the gut microbiome was, quote unquote, causative was if you took the poo from a mouse or a human who had X. So say, for example, let's use PCOS as an example. If you took the poo from someone who had PCOS and then gave it via a fecal transplant, sounds gross, but it does happen via the nose into the gut. I'm going to do all these steps to make sure it's safe and whatever else. then that next person would then develop PCOS. And then that would show you that, hey, this is actually being driven by the gut microbiome. And we were actually able to see that in people who carried more weight, people who had insulin resistance, people who had type 2 diabetes. We already knew that, and we knew that 10 years ago. We know that now. And so we haven't yet had those kinds of studies come out with PCOS, but insulin resistance, weight, they're all common things that also come along with PCOS. So it kind of seems like somewhat plausible that the gut microbiome may have some kind of role to play when it comes to PCOS. And then in the flip, can we then use that to our advantage to enhance the management of PCOS, which is actually really exciting and important. So nutrition is one of the number one ways that we can modify the gut microbiome. So what are your top tips to those listening in who have PCOS, or maybe they've got some gut health concerns? A stat that I read yesterday was 42% of people with PCOS also have IBS, or irritable bowel syndrome, which is a lot higher than the general population. So there's that element to it as well. What are some of your key tips to support gut health in those with PCOS?
Yeah, so I think probably the number one is really the plant diversity in your diet is super important. So looking at, what are the plant-based foods that you're eating? And I guess we can link this back in sort of with the last couple of lives we've been doing as well, where we've talked about the weight loss and PCOS, and we've talked about the best diet for PCOS. And certainly while those lower carbohydrate diets for PCOS can help in terms of insulin resistance and that side of things, the low carbohydrate diets tend to have a low plant intake and a low plant diversity. And when it comes to the gut microbiome element, we need the plant diversity. So we're really, at a baseline, we're aiming for people to eat at least 30 different plants every week. So if we're trying to look at, well, what are the plants that you're eating each week? If you're on a lower carbohydrate diet, you're highly restricting those plants. And so that's where, like, looking at, well, what is the best diet for PCOS? It's not necessarily the really low carbohydrate diets. They need to be well formulated. So we're taking into account like this, and if we're not getting those plants in, plants are what is feeding those bacteria that live in your gut. So that's basically what they live off, what they eat. If we're depriving them of that, then those bacteria that are in your gut are basically going to die off. And so it's really important that we're feeding our body what it needs so that we can optimize health. So it's thinking about, well, how do I get more diversity in the diet? What veggies am I eating? What fruits am I eating? What grains am I eating? And there's plenty more to look at from that side of things.
And we have that bigger study that sits outside of PCOS about the plant diversity being associated with a more diverse gut microbiome. If we have more different types of species, then that's linked to better health outcomes. And I think this conversation is a real flashback for me to that research project that I did and my microbiology interests from university. But the biggest takeaway that I often got from my studies in this space was that the relevance of plant foods and dietary fiber and all that good stuff are also like understanding that the bacteria in your gut are giving you something back. So it's not just like we're feeding them and then, that cool, we're keeping them alive, but that actually confers a direct benefit to us. So those bacteria are then going to make energy creating molecules back for us, and we can actually gain about 10% of our total energy intake back from the bacteria. They help synthesize different types of nutrients, vitamin K, vitamin B12, and then also all the health associations with a more optimized gut microbiota and different health outcomes, chronic diseases, and so on and so forth. So that is such a foundational piece. If you're not doing that, do not fuss around with probiotics and prebiotics and symbiotics and postbiotics and all the biotics, because until you've got that fundamental building block in place, the rest is kind of a little bit inconsequential in comparison. But speaking of all the biotics, what about things like prebiotics and probiotics? Are they valuable in people with PCOS, or what should we be focusing on that front?
Yeah, definitely. And so I guess like a big focus with what we're talking about prebiotics. So prebiotics are basically what we're talking about when we're talking about what feeds the good bacteria that live in your gut. So what feeds them is prebiotics. And so it is
Mm,
essential that we're eating a diet that is rich in prebiotic fibers in particular. And that is where eating these plants, eating these high fiber foods, getting in your whole grains and your fruits and your veg and your legumes and those sorts of things. These are the essential foods that we need to be having to give our body the prebiotic fibers, which feed the good bacteria and help them to continue to grow and develop. And so if we've got a diet that's low in those fibers, then that's going to mean that the good bacteria that we have aren't going to survive and thrive. So that the
mm.
prebiotics are definitely important. And then we have our probiotics. So I guess when we talk about probiotics, people think about supplements as sort of the first
Yeah.
thing that we're going to. But I think it's from a diet perspective, I think we definitely want to focus on eating more probiotic rich foods before we move into the supplementation side of things. So
Mm,
probiotics are basically helping to introduce new types of bacteria into your gut. And then the probiotics are what is going to feed that new bacteria. So if you're having probiotic rich foods or taking a probiotic supplement, but you've got a low fiber, low prebiotic intake, then that's not actually going to confer any long-term benefits for you. So I think getting the prebiotics right first is really important. Then we can layer in some probiotic rich foods. So we're thinking about things like your yogurts that have got your probiotics in them, all of those, your kefir. I'm having a mental blank on our probiotics.
sauerkraut, kimchi,
Yeah, they're the way.
miso.
I was
Yeah.
talking about them just this morning. The patient too. Always the way.
It's always the
Um,
way, the thing that you've just spoken about, you forget. It's like
yeah,
an instant wipe.
yeah. So yes, and then so eating the foods that are rich in those probiotics, and then we might potentially look at probiotic supplementation in some circumstances. But I think the issue is with probiotic supplements, specific strains do different things for different conditions,
Mm,
and we
mm.
want to be taking the right strain for the right purpose. So you might be taking a probiotic strain and it's not going to actually be doing anything if it's the wrong strain for your issue. So if you've got diarrhea, there's a certain strain you want to be taking. If you've got something else, it's a different strain that's going to be relevant for that. And
Yeah.
I don't know what the strain is specifically for PCOS that we're looking at just
Mm,
yet. So I
mm.
think that's a big area in terms of watching this space, and what we can do while we're waiting is to optimize our diet with those pre and probiotic rich foods. And then when we've got that next layer of information, we're going to hit the ground running with things like that to really
Mm.
optimize the gut microbiome for people.
Yeah, I think that strain specific stuff is something that I think the general public don't have good awareness about. Like
Mm.
we just think of probiotics as one and the
Yeah,
same. Like all probiotics are probiotics and therefore it doesn't really make a difference. But like probiotics refers to like a group of things. It's like saying, I don't know, dogs, but there's like a million breeds of dogs,
yeah,
and then there's the crosses of the dogs. And like there are so many types of dogs. Like you can say, oh, I got a dog, but like what type of dog, you know?
yeah.
So and so it's the same kind of situation with probiotics. Is that's a very big umbrella term. And so we think that there's promise in the use of probiotics in the management of PCOS to modify the gut microbiome, but we're not 100% sure which gene or which family, which species, which strains are going to really be the most valuable. And so therefore we don't really want people spending money on something that, yeah, maybe isn't going to hurt you, maybe it'll help. But I mean, it's just kind of like, why would you kind of situation. So it's definitely a case by case consideration. Like you said, like if there's particular symptom sets that we have good data for the use of probiotics like IBS or constipation or diarrhea, or there's a number of other health conditions where, we can be quite specific and narrow about it. But at the moment, we don't have that kind of level of data, sadly, for PCOS, which is a shame. But hopefully, we will get that information. Like you said, then you can hit the ground running. You've got all those foundational blocks in place that you've kindly shared with us. All right. Any final words to wrap up on this topic of gut health and PCOS, Candice?
Yeah, look, I think it's just a good opportunity to check in on your diet and see, what are you actually getting from plants at the moment? How many plant-based foods do you eat per week? Do a little checklist for yourself and see how you compare to that 30, which is the minimum amount, or is even better. So just, it's a good chance just to have a little bit of a refresher, move away from sort of the carb phobia that we get with PCOS and start focusing on the quality of the carbohydrates rather than trying to avoid them as such too. So it's just a good chance to know that this is an area that we will learn more about in the future, and we definitely know that it's an important element looking after our gut health, and we need to use diet as the first port of call for that side of things.
Yeah, absolutely. And like on that carb phobia and carb restriction note, to wrap up, like long term and in the short term, eating a diet that's extremely rich in animal proteins and low in fiber, for example, like a ketogenic diet, really ameliorates significant populations of beneficial gut bacteria, and they do die off. And then when you go to reintroduce the carbohydrates, you go, oh my God, why am I so bloated? Why am I so, why does everything feel so heavy? And it's not the carbs' fault. It's just there is the absence of those bacteria to do the work, and you need to stimulate their growth by actually eating those foods again. And that part can be really challenging for people psychologically and physically. And so if that's you, like, please, like, if you've been following a very strict low carbohydrate diet, like, take this as your sign that, like, your gut health is, like, screaming for plant foods, and that is an essential part of looking after your PCOS. And if you need help in that transition, then, like, please reach out to us and we'd be happy to support you. On that note, we have a very few spots left as we approach the end of the year for one-on-one coaching support. So our PCOS Nutrition one-on-one coaching program with Candice includes one-on-one sessions, 5 sessions over the span of 6 months, weekly check-ins and accountability to answer your questions if you're feeling stuck, supplement plan, access to our online course, the PCOS Project, and so much more, more than I can jam into this little chat. So if you'd like to book a discovery call with Candice, please reach out and we'd be happy to connect you with her for our PCOS nutrition coaching program. Until next week, everybody, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Candice. Happy Dietitians Day. And we will make sure this goes onto the feed smoothly and people can watch it back and get their gut health tips of PCOS. Bye.
See you.